It wasn't like everybody was out to get you. You just came up in this environment and you knew, well, I don't bother Mr. So-and-so or Ms. So-and-so. And those who I can talk to, and those who tell me different things with their body, that I know it's okay. It was painful as I got older when I became more aware of that separateness, not being able to go to functions, movies that came to town, and we had to sit in the separate theater and watch the movies from upstairs in cramped quarters where the whites were allowed with a larger space at the bottom. And we'd get mean and throw popcorn down on their heads, drinks and stuff. As I look back, I see not being able to go in stores and buy different things that I wanted to buy without a certain look, as if to say, why do you need that, or why do you think you can buy that? And I remember standing in line as I was about to catch the bus to leave town. And once again, it was in cramped quarters where the sign said colored and another sign said white. And going to a lunch counter, again in separate quarters and tight quarters, and being served sandwiches, and other people could get full meals. And I remember being asked to move to the back of the bus on my way out of town and into town, and asking why, and being told that it's the law. And I remember seeing sad faces of people who wanted to say, I'm sorry, but were afraid. But a lot of things still didn't bother me until I got much, much older, and discussions were brought up by my sisters and I. And then you really began to feel the pitiful hate, because there were nothing that we did, nothing that we said. We were just being us. And then I remember not being able to come over here as a student. I never even bothered to try to enter because I knew that I'd be turned down. I remember talking to my sister about it, and I could see the sadness on her face and saying, why can't we go? It's not fair. Sometimes when you're told so many times that you can't do anything, and you're in an environment where things that you know belong to you and it's being said no, you sort of push it out of your mind and you go on living with what you can. And lots of times I think I did that. I remember times walking down this very block, or at least several blocks from here, and being called nigger, and not to put my so-and-so foot on the grass, which I did. But it was knowing that something very close to you that could have made such a difference in your life was taboo, I remember playing Halloween lots of times and being subdued by Hamden Sydney College boys and different different types of ugly scenes came about with that. And simply because I know that we were just black children trying to live. I don't recall talking with my parents about it. As I said before, I'm sure there were some instances that I did, but it was like more of a understood thing without my mom telling me, well, you know you can't go there. I already knew that. Like I said, our black awareness was very vivid. She didn't have to tell me these things because I got around in the neighborhood enough and I knew them myself. There were talks of when she said, yes, you know, white people don't want you there, those sort of things. But I got more feedback from my older sister because I think as she was blossoming and wanted to do things with her peers, they realized what was behind it all. And I think this helped to bring about my awareness even more when those discussions came to her and her peers. And I sensed her fear and her pain more than my mom's because she had been brought up in even a more restricted type of lifestyle than even I. And it was just expected. Not that people didn't want to fight back, but a lot of times they didn't know how. And it was just no use if you did it with one-on-one or just one per se. And then it could only be in words, which had no bearing, no meaning to make a change. So I think my older sister was the one that brought forth the bitterness and the pain and allowing me to know that my rights were taken from me. I think I knew it a long time, but because of the hurt, you just sort of pushed it in the background. It's just small things, like you know you want to go places. You know you want to, like going to the lake. It was an area, a recreation area, where in Prince Edward, where black children went to swim. And of course that was separate. And as the old saying goes, the grass looks always green on the other side. And then there again, their side was larger. And we just wondered, well, why can't we go? Why does it have to be like this? Why is it always separate? Why can't we just mix it? And it was those things that came up as a teenager, as she grew, and wanted to explore, her and her friends. And that helped me become aware, because when she would come home and find out that, well, we couldn't do this, or we weren't served properly, or we had to go, they asked us to go in the corner and we refused. These sort of things started coming out. And this is where I would be somewhere around in the house and I would hear her talking about it. Or I'd just sit and listen to her tell me. And then we became more aware. And of course our teachers, principals. But so much of it was like a tokenism, even then. When I was very young, like 7, 8, 9, the local radio station here, WFLO, used to broadcast from the elementary school. And I sung, always sung. And that little show, for about 30 minutes, once a week, was like, well, you don't You didn't think about anybody being prejudiced because you got that chance to do that. You see, and with me, that was a big thing, you know. And I guess I thought even beyond that, and other ways around me in some way, that it was that same way. That here I was invited to present my songs on radio. And I was free. I could do this. But then that was such a small thing after I realized what it was all about. There were times when that anger just spilled over with just one of them looking at you. You know, it didn't have to be something really big, but I know now that it came from something else, and I asked myself now, was that because of it? Was that anger then because of the way he looked at me or she looked at me? Or was it because I know that you don't want me to be a part of you and you don't want to be a part of me? And then there were good times. There were good relationships with white kids in the country. There were relationships that even then I was surprised at when I'd go to visit my cousins. And they all lived so close around one another. And I'd stand and look and wonder, why is he talking to her that way, or she's talking to him that way? And look how they have feelings toward one another. It was such a closeness. They were getting along so well, even as kids. And I'd stand and look. And then when he'd say something to me or touch me, I'd cringe and wouldn't know really how to respond. But as I look back, I realized too that was good. And they didn't care, you know. They were friends. And it didn't make a difference. And I know too that now, even to this day, those friendships are still there, you know. As I grew older, it always played a great part in recreation for children in the community. There were plays and Sunday afternoon programs, cantatas, and it was a big thing. It wasn't this flighting thing as you see now. Really hard work was done to make costumes and to learn those lines and learn them right. And every parent came out to be there for that presentation that night. And every parent was proud that their child even had a wee bit part in a play. I remember the rhythm band we had, where we had our sticks and our little bells and drums, and we proudly marched down the aisle to bring in the other players. I did lots of things that I never thought I could because of school and because of the good teachers we had. I think that if it hadn't been for school, a lot of boys and girls, of course, would have been in deep trouble. The boys more so, because the girls sort of always found something to do. But the boys, vigorous and rough and wanting to play and get into games. If that school hadn't been there, then there had been something on a back alley or a back room that would have been going on illegal. And it also helped them to develop their potential. We all knew what it was. At that time, Reverend Griffin, L. Francis Griffin, my minister, decided to try to right the wrongs. And he became our hope in our fight for us. Of course, there was terrible anger, but with a lot, you could only verbalize. You could only quarrel about it among yourselves or talk it to other people like I'm talking to you. But he did fight. Reverend Griffin did fight for our cause. And a lot of other good people, the American Friends, the Quakers, took in children from the school situation and placed them in their homes. And they finished high school and finished college. Parents were outraged. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. My mother was it was just so very pitiful at why would anybody want to close the whole school because you didn't want a few people to mix. And at that time, we began to get hopeful, and we thought, well, maybe they'll open it in October, November. And the months kept going and going and going and going. And every summer we'd sit and listen to the same thing. We kept hope. I know this. We kept hope. We kept prayers. I don't know, it just, as I said before, the parents who, everybody fought, but there are others who were determined to fight another way. And instead of fighting people here who refused to see things the way they should have been, they just left. It was an ugliness that has scarred Prince Edward, I'm sorry to say, but it'll always be there, always. As anybody, when you make mistakes in life, you don't realize the outcome of it until it's done. But then when you let it linger and linger and linger, never trying to change it to make things better, then you know it had to be done deliberately. I think because of the fact that those schools closed and the ugliness, the ugly scar that was left on Prince Edward, and it was worldwide. I remember going places, and people would ask me, where are you from? Sometimes I wouldn't even say, because I was ashamed. I really was. Because if I tried to make them know it by saying, well, do you know Prince Edward, the place that they kept the schools closed for 5 years? Oh. And I got tired of that. I didn't want to be connected with it because it was always such a sadness and so many questions. And it'll never go away. I'm not bitter about it now, but I know that there are some who are, and rightly so. Because there are some who never went anywhere else. Then there are adults who went on to even get their GEDs And but it wasn't just the education as far as the academic part is concerned. It was that socialization, that nobody knew what could have come of it if those people had stayed in a union. You know what I'm saying? We were stronger, and we would have been stronger. But it made our community weak because people, and good, strong people, left, and they didn't want to come back. I think for the whites that I know it was felt, the merchants and whomever, because you can't, everybody on, it's just like this planet, everybody's here together, you know? Like, what would you be in here without me? Or I without you in this room for this purpose? And when you weaken it and lessen it, how can it grow? And there were years that were dormant and did not grow. And some parts never will, because those parts that were severed cannot be replaced. To tear down something for that long a period of time, it had to be a terrible fear, a great fear, that they, even if they allowed the doors to be open, that they felt like they couldn't control. Or it was because I don't want you to know what I know, because if you do, then your power would be as great as mine. So it was mostly fear and ignorance, and a way of they just refused to grow, and they wanted to keep us from growing also. And that's why it's so sad, because these were adults, and at that time I was a young adult, but I didn't have the mind that I have now, and I can see things much clearer. And at this age, some of them they were fighting. Why couldn't they see what I see? You see what I'm saying? If you got control of your house, then you don't have to worry. If you got control of your mind, then why do you worry about mine? You know? So it was a fear. And I think the question in people's minds, and the parents, the black parents' mind, was, why? Why do you want to do this long, this to children? You know? And it was stagnated. And I think the time length was deliberate, because they knew that there wouldn't be any way for some to catch up, which they never did. In that essence. But if you want to grow, you grow. If you want to grow. And some did. Some fought it. And these great minds produced great things. But I really would have liked to have told them that they didn't have to fear, because I really do believe that's what it was. They didn't know us, and we didn't know them per se, so what else could there be but fear? When you don't know something, and you don't want to know, there's a reason for it. And if they had just given themselves a chance, I could see them opening the schools and then deciding, well, hey, this is not going to work. Let's close them. You know, things are getting out of hand. But to just say flat out no. And like I said before, there are some people who I wouldn't want to be around my children and around me either. But you learn how to get around those things. And if you were there and I'm here, And we're in the same environment. What you take in and what I take in are two different things. I don't have to trespass against you, nor you me. But let me have mine and you have yours. But let's have it all together. Because you can't separate it anyway. You cannot. And I think they realize this now, because a lot of people are dependent on us, or we realize we're dependent on each other in order to grow and survive. It doesn't matter, you know. You're bad, no matter what color you are. You know, you're good, you're good. What does color have to do with it? You see with your eyes and I see with mine. You smell with your nose, I smell with mine, you know. But it was that, I think a lot of people at that time would have gone along. But there are those who are stronger in the community, who had that top ranking, and they say no. And the rest were afraid to rebel. Because I know that there are good brothers and sisters who are of a different color. I'm wise enough to know that. And because of all kinds of stupid reasons, they followed and believed them. You know, well, I'll get you out your job if you don't do such and such a thing. And some of them left too. All this foolishness. I think it would have been much milder than they realized, because the place where I did go to school, where I did finish, Cumberland County, which is about 18 miles down the road, there were no incidents. There are always those who will tell you different, those who will trespass or try to trespass against their brothers. But God's plan is not just an idea. It's a reality. And those of us who know better know that we must continue to fight, because it's yours and it's mine, you know. And I may not see it and you may not see it, but it will be that way, because it's a reality. It's a reality right now for you and me. We're interacting. I'm not going to try to come and sit in your lap. I like you where you are. That's what this is for. And when I leave, it's bye. Some people will go beyond that, but you've got to know how to deal with them. Just like somebody coming in and robbing your house. But yes, there is, because we're all out here together. And this planet is not going to turn upside down for us. We can turn upside down, but it's going to keep on evolving. And God is in control. It will be that way. It will. It's a reality. That was life, even during that time, even though it was a part of life that I didn't approve of. I don't want to erase it, because there are pieces of it that help me to grow. There are pieces of it that help me to remain human, to be sensitive, to be angry, to be fearful, to be all that I am to be. And to tell it and expect them not to to see it that same way is not to be telling it truthfully. Because it was all those things. There are lessons to be learned, and one of the great lessons were that I must have needed to be stronger